Hello there. I've been writing articles and translating ancient texts. How you doing? I must be losing weight. This shirt is like way too big. I'm like swimming in it now. Doesn't feel like it, but apparently it is. Nevertheless, still too fat. This is a note of caution for everybody. I know some people that are ordering a lot of stuff for clients because of the tariffs that are actually coming up. If there's any sort of daily cheap gadget or things that you use, I don't really think most people are making note of the fact of what's coming down as far as how hard it'll be get a hold of and or how possibly expensive it's going to get. This video is called The Golden Thread of Eternity. Wanted to, so I could stick all of this into 5 minutes. Of course, explaining each sentence of the 5 minutes takes longer. About the simplicity of nature. And I know you're going to think this is an egotistical statement, but there's nobody on YouTube that comes close into doing that. I mean, everything is ultimately like grand unified theory they're looking for, of course, from the perspective of nature, which is not a being, or a person, or a god, etc. Everything is obviously already unified. I posted this quote on the community board, and I created it today. It took me just a matter of a few minutes to do it, and I read it over 4 times. Like, how could I make this sound any better? And this is my quote, and I couldn't think of anything other than a slight grammatical change and a couple little things. Simplicity is divinity. The center must hold, like the center of a wheel. You can't have a center here and a center over there, regarding one wheel anyway, not multiple wheels. Center must hold to represent nature accurately. Modern so-called science is a grotesque slander against unified natural divinity, which it is, which has its countless facets unified, of course, in eternity, like the facets of a crystal, which are merely geometries of the one crystal. You can't say, well, this is the facet over here, and that's the facet. You know, that's accurate, superficially so, but these are just different attributional facets and geometries of the crystal. You cannot espouse anti-intellectual absurdities of quantum, electrons, space-time, autonomous separate entities, and so forth, without literally defaming nature, wisdom, and rational common sense. It's impossible. You can't do it. Universal truth, of course, has no language, time, place, or person as its center. Its very center is unified divine simplicity and, of course, cosmic spanning truth. Nature contains no dualities, contradictions, nor any form of this here and that there, which is what science does currently all the time. Every aspect of academia does that. Well, you got this over here and that over there. It's like, well, nature can't work that way. It can't exist that way. I mean, the center doesn't hold. That's what that phrase means. Does the center hold? Is everything unified, pointing at one central hub is what does the center hold mean. Some people might not get that little phrase. Is the ancient Pali, which I've been translating now for nearly 30 years. In Sanskrit, the word is sutra. The Pali word is sutta. It literally means thread. And the thread that's used, of course, is the thread for the warps and the wefts of making up the fabric of truth. And ultimately, we have to talk about the center and the simplicity of nature. When you actually talk about a garment, it's like, well, it's got sleeves here and, you know, a waist there and then this and the that. It's like, well, all of that's true, but all of it is just based on one thread. And of course, this is the thread of truth. You know, that words are weaved to create the picture of eternity and natural order, and to, of course, of divinity. There is one thing through all of, of course, there's no such thing as science versus metaphysics here. I mean, once again, you can't have that. Everything is unified. That's like talking about, you know, the head side of a coin or tail side of the coin. They're both different facets of one silver or gold of the coinage, of course. The one thing that it ties everything together, and it goes by many different names: vibration, frequency, perturbation, modulation, Pali and Sanskrit words vritti and bhava, which mean disturbance or vibration. Bhava means becoming, but becoming, of course, is also too a modulation. The same is actually true in the metaphysics of Christianity, which got everything from things that are far, far more ancient than it, just as this idea of so-called Buddhism is like whole and unique. You know, we got Buddhism here and it's over there. No, 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 no. No, 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 that's not the case. Avidya or agnosis, Pali word, Sanskrit word, means excess. Specifically, it's translated as ignorance, but it literally means illumination with respect to light. Saying illumination with respect to light is talking about the attribute of light. Light's the principle, illumination is its attribute. When we say illumination, we mean frequency or modulation. All light has a frequency. That modulation is the light directed away from itself. All EMR, of course, is a blinking torus. I don't know if you can wrap your mind around a donut, i.e. a torus, but it is not substantial as in the case of matter, where you would actually have a physical torus. It's a blinking torus, electromagnetic radiation. I've accurately called it a coaxial circuit, but that kind of confuses people's minds. I thought, well, how can I make it more simple? Just call it what it actually is, a blinking torus. In the Bible, for example, we have the idea of excess, the desire for excess, and excess itself. Just like feeding a fire, you know, it keeps us warm, so on and so forth. But excess is that it never is self-sustaining. You have to keep feeding it, and feeding it, and feeding it to maintain it. Evil is excess, and excess is evil. All forms of metaphysics are the same. Well, frequency modulation of spirit is that which breeds excess. And excess, of course, is the root of all human misery. Yeah? All of it. This is the single thread, or sutta, that runs through all metaphysics. I'm not interested in discussing religion, even though I just mentioned Christianity. 666, which is what people think is concordant with the idea of, you know, the great evil. What it literally is letters in Greek, which of course I think most everybody knows corresponds to numbers. Those three letters add up to 666. In Latin, in Greek it is excessius, in Latin is excessius. English is nearly the same. Excess. Excess is evil, and evil is excess. But what is that which is driving the evil or the excess? Well, whether it be Pali, Greek, or Sanskrit, it's avidya or agnosis, or avidya in Sanskrit, same term. It's always translated as ignorance, but it doesn't mean ignorance. It means modulation. It literally means primordial agnosis, which is an uncaused cause. This creationistic idea of original sin, i.e. prima causa, or first cause, does not exist. This is where creationism is absolutely the total furthest from emanationism, but I'm not going to get into defining emanationism here, but that idea is completely foreign. It's part of Abrahamic and basically all other religious systems, and emanationism is completely autonomous from that. Time and space, for example, of course, are the children or the after effect of the magnetic field, and magnetism itself is nothing other than the modulation of the dielectric. The reason why we actually have pole reversal on the Earth is called geomagnetic precessional torque. Magnetism itself is a frequency. It's called the L'Amour frequency. Go look that up. This is the frequency of the refulgent centrifugal dielectric field that us nutty human beings call magnetism. In other words, the dielectric under modulation is this three-dimensional force vector that we call magnetism. And magnetism is a frequency. That frequency, of course, is modulation. Light is this blinking torus, i.e. all electromagnetic radiation. Electricity, too, of course, has a frequency. Electricity is not an autonomous field modality. It's the byproduct of two things, dielectricity and magnetism, but that's not for this discussion. Magnetism, like I said, has a frequency. The mean magnetic frequency, or the average, is 42 megahertz, or million cycles. Of course, a cycle is a frequency, is a disturbance. This is the thread that runs through all metaphysics, the whole universe. Even Nikola Tesla told you the secrets of the universe are energy, frequency, and vibration. Well, say frequency vibration is like saying wet and water. Like, well, water is wet, and most things that are wet are water. Same thing, frequency and vibration. You know, vibration of what? Energy. Well, define energy, and that's where people have a really hard time. They think energy is the release of energy, which is actually the impotency of energy. This is the reason for misery. Just like this fire must be perpetually fed. This is not energy. Sure it is. Releasing heat keeps you warm. Like, well, that's true, but you have to perpetually feed it. That is the impotency of energy. You're burning the wood, it's keeping you warm. It is releasing of energy. The fire would be analogous to magnetism. The wood itself, unlit, would be kind of analogous to the dielectric. And then, of course, we have to talk about energy as rest, because that's what true energy is. But all of humanity since the dawn of time has always had everything upside down and backwards. So once again, the thread that makes the garment, that stitches the truth of the entire cosmos, not just Earth here and us crazy humans, the entire universe, that thread is vibration. Vibration of what and due to what, of course, are the questions. The answer, of course, is avidya. Well, avidya, looked it up in the dictionary, it says ignorance. It doesn't mean ignorance. It's no different than saying illumination. Illumination is the light directed away from itself due to its frequency or modulation. Of course, all EMR, electromagnetic radiation, that blinking torus, has a frequency. We call it the wavelength or the frequency of light. That 3D modulation, of course, in the case of magnetism and light, is a torus, a three-dimensional force vector. All force, by definition, of course, is modulation, and all modulation is tied at the nexus. Once again, does the center hold? It's tied at the center. Everything is tied at the center. That's why there's no straight lines in the universe. That nexus of gravity, we could call it a ground. The thing we call an electrical ground is no different than saying counter space, by the way. The ground would be that black hole you see at the center of every ferrocell video, which I made thousands of them. You know, that rest nexus. Yeah. Spatial and anti-spatial. These are not antinomies either, nor dualities. There are no dualities in nature. These are the antinomies. Like the water out of the shower head. Everybody takes a shower, at least I hope everybody does. The water out of the shower head's the one water. The water that goes down the drain is the same water, but it has completely different attributional states. It's all the water. The magnetism would be like the water coming into the shower head, and the water going back down to the drain, to the rest point. Not that there is a rest point at the bottom of the drain. It goes back to the waste treatment facility, but that's taking the analogy too far. It would be analogous to like the hole on the center of every magnet. And you've seen those videos. I got thousands of them. Thousands. It's pretty good analogy. You can't take the analogy too far, but it's really good for understanding things in your head, why things are working. Spiritual modulation, which is the thread, and this is the golden thread of the universe. This is not my opinion. I don't care about my opinions or your beliefs or my beliefs. You know, what you believe in. What do you believe? You believe what I believe. I don't care what you believe. I'm interested in the absolute truth that spans one end of this universe to the next. A real truth seeker only cares about that. I don't care what I think, feel, or believe, or you yourself either. I'm only interested in the truth. This spiritual modulation, of course, is the primordial agnosis spoken of. Translating avidya or agnosis or avidya in Sanskrit, they're all the same word, is about as impossible. It's actually more impossible to do that than it is to translate the Greek word logos. I got a neat book in the back room back there. It's 346 pages long, and the whole book is based on trying to translate the word ananke, which is impossible. You can't translate it. I know exactly what it means, but there's... I don't know. It's funny. There's another book like I have back there. I try to translate another word in Greek, and it fails. It tries to translate the word toma. Yeah. Some of these things are... This is where incommensurability comes in, which is, by the way, quote-unquote, exactly so, the only secret of the Pythagoreans, incommensurability. Incommensurability is embodied by this neat little triangle I have upside down on the back of my hand, which in triplicate makes up the Pythagorean pentagram, the 115 triangle of perfect, harmonic incommensurability of the entire universe. But that's a matter for another discussion. I got to write 2 books based upon the principle of the emanationism of that particular triangle, which is the symbol of the Pythagoreans, by the way, and who knows how much earlier than them. Human beings, of course, are dazzled by phenomena. We were dazzled by the fire here. All phenomena, of course, are the product of fields. Simplicity is divinity, which is my quote, by the way. I've been using it for decades now. I created it. All fields are what? Well, all fields are ether perturbation modalities. Makes it kind of simple, doesn't it? Well, Avidya doesn't mean ignorance, even all translations will translate it that way. Rather, the modulation of spirit. Avidya or agnosis is perfect, analogous principles so that you could grasp it in your brain, is talking about illumination relative to light. But of course, human beings, seeing everything upside down and backwards, we think, well, this is illumination, you know, like the light that's on my hand or on anything. No, no, no. I mean, this is light. You know, look, well, there's no light in that which is illuminated. The thing that we think is nobody sees light. People see illumination. Light is the rest nexus energy. Before you flip the switch on, say the light is connected to a battery, for example, that charge potential at rest, say it's a perfect battery which doesn't exist, you know, it's there forever and ever and ever until you put it under modulation and we actually have this blinking torus that we call light, or EMR. Human beings always see everything upside down and backwards. This is the fundamental truth of metaphysics. This is also, too, is the reason why I've told you over and over again, one of the core secrets to understanding the universe is understanding the two lights and the two darknesses. And the third thing to understand is the conjugate nature of the universe, principal attribute, like the dielectric and the magnetic. They're not two different things, they're the same thing, like light and illumination, principle and attribute. Same is true with the absolute. The inverse fallacy of identification, the fundamental fallacy of all creationism is saying, well, as above, so below. Therefore, too, as below down here, i.e. sentient beings, is a lesser form of sentience up there. Therefore, the absolute is sentient and thinking. And this, of course, is the fundamental, worst and most inaccurate principle of all creationism. But what people believe is of no concern of mine. I'm not interested in discussing religion or creationism, which are kind of one of the fundamentally the exact same thing. Light and illumination, principle and attribute. But of course, this attribute is the modulation. Nikola Tesla, once again, secret of the universe, energy, frequency, vibration. Bhava Nirodha Nabandham. Nirvana is the subjugation of Nirodha, spiritual modulation, or in this case, Bhava. Bhava Nirodha Nabandham. I know you don't translate ancient Pali, but I mean, that keeps it really simple. Bhava means becoming, which means spiritual modulation. The same is true of another word, vritti, yoga chit vritti nirodha. That's from the Yoga Sutta Patanjali's. This is a very, very ancient, one simple little small sentence that sums up the entirety of the Vedas. And man, the Vedas are huge. The Athura Veda, the Sama Veda, the Rig Veda, enormous. It's like, yeah, it's too much. Like, you're right. What if I could stick all of the Vedas in one tiny little free? Okay, do it. That make things easier. I don't got time for that. Great. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. The goal of yoga, i.e. liberation, is Chitta Vritti, which means the spirit or the nous or the soul. Chitta. Vritti means disturbance, perturbation of same. Nirodha, subjugation of. Yoga is, in other words, liberation is the subjugation of nirodha chittavritti, disturbances of the spirit. This is talking about avidya or agnosis, which is falsely translated as ignorance. Sure, all dictionaries agree that's translation of avidya or agnosis. They all do agree, but that's not actually what it means. You write a tiny little booklet about what avidya or agnosis means, but that's a matter for another video maybe. Rest, of course, is transcendence, and of course, too, fulfillment. This is undeniable. This is the thread that runs through everything. I could put all of this into a nutshell. People say, you can't do it. Well, not only can I do it, I've done it many, many times. I've even got links below in the description for that. By the way, if you like these videos, any donation is always warmly welcome. All living misery is modulation of spirit. You know, the one thing people say is original to Buddhism, which is totally not original. They'll talk about the Four Noble Truths. Buddhism came out with Four Noble Truths. Well, it's super ancient. And Buddhism didn't come up with that, by the way, which is a term that didn't exist until the 16th century, this idea of Buddhism. It's an ancient principle from ancient India. Of course, India didn't exist back then. It was so. This is so ancient. It's a doctor's motto. It's fourfold. Suffering. You see someone suffering. Look at that man. That guy's miserable. Suffering. Identify the disease or the source of the malady. Number 3 is to diagnose. Well, this is what's wrong with the dude, and we've diagnosed it. This is what's going on. And number 4 is the cure. So it's suffering, disease, diagnosis, cure. There's like 10 million things on the internet that will tell you, Four Noble Truths, original Buddhism. It's not original Buddhism. It's just absolutely not true. Once again, I don't care about religions. But this is getting to the root of things, this primordial agnosis, avidya. Avidya and agnosis is not different than saying modulation, frequency, perturbation, disturbance. The ancient words, vritti and bhava. Same thing, different ancient languages. The exact same. This is the thread that everything ties together. The center does hold. Everything is based upon this principle of avidya or agnosis, modulation of spirit. Not my opinion, this is fact. Belief and faith, of course, are the most detestable to me. And, miserable mirages that are completely antithetical to wisdom and insight. This is, and this isn't the quote from Thomas Paine, that I think it is, religions are the idolatry of the ancient mythologists. It remains the work of reason and philosophy to abolish this. That's from Thomas Paine. The faith in the things that people believe in, which I don't care what people believe in, belief is a superficial plaything of children, are the things that actually destroy the soul. And it's really a 9-point list. It's really simple. If it spreads like a virus or a parasite, or it tries to, it's false. Nothing of it fulfills the person that it believes in, because they're content not with it at all, rather only in spreading it. They're not content. It is not fulfilling of itself. They're only happy if they can spread it by whatever means possible. It engenders fear in people or ignorance in people, magnifies the ignorance. This makes it false. It's hostile. The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine is all about this. It's hostile to reason, common sense, and logic. It has its beginning in a time or a place. If it does, it's false. It's centered around a specific being. Well, before Guru Bada Bing came along, everybody was doomed. It's just crazy. That's completely antithetical to rationality. Nothing that's universally true can have a beginning. It's impossible. Nobody thinks. People didn't used to think. Now people really don't think. If it's not timeless and universal, it can't be true. That's not my opinion. That's undeniable. You can't argue against it because it's ironclad. It's an immovable, impenetrable rock of truth. If it has a beginning in time or place or person, it can't be a universal truth. And if it's not a universal truth, then it's not true. Does the center hold in it? Well, in the case of any and all religions, which is secularized metaphysics, the answer is no. Faith is not the evidence of things not seen, rather the conviction in irrational and unwise phantasms of mind. The USA, by the way, United States here, was founded by Adam Weishaupt and Thomas Paine. Alas, these were the Bavarian, and I'm not part of them, okay? Part of the Bavarian Illuminatus, The Age of Reason, written by Thomas Paine. There's a great video. It's 3 hours long, and it's just quote after quote after quote after quote. It's on the tube here. It's called Hidden Faiths of the Founding Fathers. I think you will really like it. Super rational, super logical, the idea that the United States was founded on this or any religion. No. And they give you, not their opinions in the video, just endless quotes from Franklin and Adams and George Washington and on and on and on and on. It just goes endlessly. I think you really like it. Paine was, of course, very close friends with Washington. Against the tyranny of the monarchy, which of course it was, and of the church, both of which, of course, are hostile to reason and common sense. This is a quote from Thomas Paine. This is a really good one, and I'm not really a fan of his writings. I mean, they're not really super intellectual like from the Neoplatonists or the Platonists or the Pythagoreans. To believe that God created a plurality of worlds, which of course is true, not God, but there's plurality of worlds out there with sentient beings on it, at least as numerous as that which we can count in the stars in the sky, renders the Christian system, or any system of faith, at once little and ridiculous, and scatters in it the mind like feathers in the air. The two beliefs cannot be held together in the same mind. In other words, this of course gets back to what I'm talking about. It can't have a beginning in time or place. It has to be a fundamental universal truth. This idea that it started in time with a specific it's just absolute irrational ridiculousness. I refuse, under any constraint, even if I lost half my mind, to believe in such absurdities. Well, of course, what people believe in is, once again, no concern of mine. This is from President John Adams. Pythagoreans, as well as Platonic philosophers, concurred that the fabrication of the Trinity concocted up the fabrication of the Christian Trinity, which is true. The Trinity is a harmony, which is the vibration of the three sections of the first five of the Fibonacci sequence, which are monad, mind, magnitude and matter, and five ontos, or being. So we actually have three sections. That's where the Trinity comes from, which is super ancient. It's the same idea that, Trinity is Christian and that's where it started. It's the same idea that Buddhism came up with the Four Noble Truths. It's like, no, it didn't. It's suffering, disease, diagnosis, cure. It's super ancient. It is at least 3,000-4,000 years old. It's like the oldest thing on planet Earth. Buddhism didn't come up with it. Yet superficial minds that cleave towards religions and beliefs say, we came up with it, this is ours. It didn't exist until... Just not true at all. Same is true of the Trinity. That's where the Trinity came from, by the way, too. Tamius 26c, I think, talks about the union of two things, which requires a third. That's the other Trinity. The union between spirit and matter requires a third thing. That third thing is a perfect incommensurable third, which is water. Kind of like the radio and the signal. The signal is everywhere and nowhere. This would be analogous to the body. The signal would be, of course, the spirit. Requires a third thing. There's no union, there's no broadcast in this analogy without the third thing, which is the antenna. The antenna for life and consciousness is, of course, water. This is a very, very timeless Trinity. It didn't start with Christianity at all. But this is the golden thread that runs throughout all the universe from one end of it to the next. And it is not specific. It doesn't have a beginning in time or place, etc. It's impossible for it to. Impossible. I hope you like this video. If you do, any donation is always very warmly welcome. I wish everybody, it's just a vacation day, whatever. I know it's a religious holiday, but actually predates Christianity too. Happy Easter. I should just say happy day off. You take some time with your family. Hope you have a happy holiday off. I should have just said happy holiday instead of specific religious holiday. And thanks for watching. Lux e veritas. Goodbye.